from the Bible. He knows their location, and so he's been an excellent dialogue companion tonight. I learned a lot by listening to him. At the same time, I feel that the key issue we were discussing actually should be settled on the Islamic side. Notice that when Jonathan spoke about God punishing his son, he's calling one of these individuals God, and he's calling the other one the son. And this terminology itself shows that they're not co-equal persons. If they were co-equal persons, you would call them something like twin brothers, or clones, or co-equals, or something like that. You know, one of the co-equals sent his co-equal, or God sent the other God, or something like this. But God sent his son. Why only one of them is called God? And why would God punish his son in order to ensure justice? Is there any justice system in the world in which we punish an innocent person in order to let the guilty one go free? If we want to let the guilty one go free, we'll let the guilty one go free, either out of compassion or because we still see that there is remorse, or the harm that we were trying to deal with is no longer there, or something like this. And that is the point of the story which Jonathan related from the Hadith. This is how God forgives. And in fact, this is how he does it also in the Gospel according to Luke chapter 15. Many examples like this are given where God freely forgives, like the example of the prodigal son. He doesn't demand that somebody has to bear the penalty. The father welcoming his prodigal son doesn't say, I have to kill the other son in order to free this son or to forgive this son. No, he forgives him. Turning to some of the earlier arguments that Jonathan presented, it doesn't help to say that Ibn Ishaq thought that Paul was a true disciple of Jesus. Ibn Ishaq was a human being. Muslims may find some value in his writings, but also some things which are not valuable. The fig tree episode, I think, is one of the key things that show that Jesus, on whom be peace, was not God. Because Mark's Gospel, before the others modified the story and tried to make a lesson out of it, the story in Mark's Gospel says, because it was not the season for figs. That's why there was no fig. And Jesus thought he would find figs. He didn't find any. Therefore, he cursed the tree, and the tree withered. So, obviously, we have a major problem here for the omniscience of Jesus. So, too, with the statements where Jesus clearly says he does not know when the hour will occur. I'm not saying that Jesus actually said all of these words exactly, so Muslims have to accept that he is the Son. I'm saying that this is a problem for Christianity, because Christianity has to rely on the New Testament for their doctrine to prove the Trinity, and this very document is showing that there is no Trinity. One is omniscient, the other one is not. Therefore, they're not two co-equal divine persons from all of eternity. Mark chapter 10, verse 18 does have a follow-up from what I mentioned previously. But if you look at the follow-up, it's clear that Jesus and the man he was speaking to are referring to somebody else as God. The man said, you are right, teacher, there is only one God, and besides him there is no other. He doesn't say, beside you there is no other. Not that you are God, there is somebody else who is God. I think Jonathan misunderstood Quran 53, because in the Quran there is iltifat. Sometimes the subject changes, and you have to interpret the Quran within the light of its clear statements. And even Jonathan said that vague statements have to be interpreted in light of the clear ones. So I think he's made this mistake of interpreting a vague statement in the Quran because there's this iltifat, and now it looks a little bit confusing. It requires exegesis, we know that, but that's a field by itself and it needs to be studied. But you cannot take a vague statement and build a new theology out of it. The Quran is saying again and again there is only one God. You can't take a vague statement and say, now it looks like you got two gods, guys. Neither can we do that for the Quran nor for the Bible. And unfortunately, it looks like the Trinity doctrine is supported by this kind of faulty exegesis of the New Testament and the rest of the Bible. Quran 32 also does not indicate that God has another being, there is another spirit apart from God that does the creation. So too in the Old Testament, when the Spirit is spoken about, this could be some aspect of God, but not a separate being, an individual. Otherwise, the Jews should have said that we are Binitarians. We have two persons who is in one God, because now we know the Father and we know the Spirit. And later on, the Christians would say we have three, because now the Son has manifested himself. But then that also opens the possibility that there is a fourth waiting to manifest himself before we blink an eye. So how do we know? The only way to know is go by what the scripture says. It says from beginning to end there is only one God. The one who is called God in the Bible is always one God, not Jesus. And Jesus does not say, worship me. And there are others who say something which looks like it indicates some kind of worship of Jesus. But I think Jonathan is wrong. Parskineo does not necessarily mean the kind of worship that is deserving of God. Other people bow before other people, and it says proskuneo Benai Autoi, he bowed before him. A servant bows before a king, for example. It's not worship, it's obeisance. And in the end, we should say that the authorship of these documents are disputed, and we cannot rely on them to give us a doctrine that is so complicated as the doctrine of Trinity, which appears to be logically fallacious. In the end, I'm glad we had this dialogue. I thank you all for your patient listening, and I hope we can continue this dialogue of understanding as friends, and we can walk out of here today as friends, Muslims and Christians, and we can cooperate in every good work to make our world a better and a safer place. Thank you all very much.
What a fantastic evening. I think we should just put our hands together one more time just to thank Jonathan and Shabir. As I'd hoped earlier, both speakers have led by example. I'm sure you agree.